Hey there, welcome to Africa News, bringing you the top stories on the continent this hour. Calm returns to the Central African Republic following weeks of sectarian violence. Meanwhile, the National Transitional Council has issued a timetable to elect a peacemaker president. Now, confident of Europe's backing, the French President François Hollande says he's optimistic his allies will boost France's efforts to prevent further sectarian strife in the Central African Republic. And Egyptians headed to the polls this Tuesday for a referendum that could pave the way for a presidential bid by General Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. Polling was mostly smooth, but officials say at least 11 people died in clashes outside Cairo. Firstly, in the Central African Republic, the National Transitional Council began talks this Tuesday to decide on who will take the reins as interim leader following Michel Djatodia's resignation last Friday. Well, the special session of Parliament reconvenes on Wednesday, but according to the NTC, a list of possible candidates will be published on Friday, while elections for the interim head of state will be held on Saturday. Well, meanwhile, tensions are easing in Bangui and institutions are slowly reopening. For the past few days, former soldiers who defected when President François Bozizé was ousted last March have been flocking to enrol in the country's new army. James Andre has the story.
These men are the soldiers who defected when the Seleka took Bangui. Today, they're back to form the Central African Army. Their task will be to bring security to their country. They have been hiding or fighting alongside militias for months.
We have not been paid for 4 months, so it has been very difficult for us.
A new chief of staff has been appointed. The interim government want to deploy the troops by Friday, but all are worried about the lack of equipment.
They must supply these units with the required equipment. First we need weapons and ammunition, then uniforms and vehicles. Then we will reorganize this army and get it out on the streets.
Interim President Nguendet plans to bring security to Bangui and then deploy them to the whole country. Today, he has come to address the troops with a clear message to the militias.
If you're anti-Balaka, you must lay down your weapons now and join these ranks. If you're ex-Seleka, you must lay down your weapons. Those that will not comply with these orders will face consequences. And by consequences, I mean they will be crushed with lethal force. Trust me and be proud of me. I'm here before you to tell you I'm the man for the job.
The interim government has clearly decided to kickstart the institutions here in the Central African Republic. The return of these soldiers is a first step, and it's also a good sign for the future of the situation here in Bangui.
Well, we're still talking the Central African Republic here on France 24. President François Hollande voiced confidence earlier today that Europe would back French efforts to prevent any further unrest in the country. Well, France sent troops to its former colony a month ago after a coup fueled the instability there, as Nicolas Germain reports.
For the last 18 months, Africa has dominated François Hollande's foreign policy. On Tuesday, he said he was proud of France's 2 current military interventions on the continent. Firstly, the one in Mali, launched a year ago against jihadists who occupied the north of the country.
Sometimes you need to acknowledge certain victories, and this is one. Especially against terrorism. The operation is ending. In February, we will have only 1,600 soldiers there and 1,000 by the end of spring.
François Hollande also assessed the situation in the Central African Republic, where he went last month. There are 1,600 French troops there, and he said there would be no increase in that number.
We are working with the other countries in the region. The Central African Republic is not being annexed. It must have a political transition that will entail elections like the ones that happened in Mali.
In theory, the election must take place early next year. François Hollande also said this intervention's aim was only to save people. He vowed to bring an end to the so-called France-Afrique, when Paris was sometimes accused of handpicking African leaders in its former colonies.
In other news on the continent, Egyptians are headed to the polls this Tuesday in a constitutional referendum that could pave the way for a presidential bid by Army Chief General Abdel Fattah el-Sisi. Though the polling stations were mostly smooth, officials said at least 11 people were killed in clashes outside of Cairo. The new constitutional text leaves out controversial Islamist language while strengthening state institutions, including the military. Ketivan Gorgestani reports.
Despite the more than 200,000 police officers deployed for the two-day referendum, a bomb went off just before polls opened, damaging a Cairo courthouse. But the blast didn't scare away voters who turned out in numbers to cast their ballots for the new constitution.
This is our answer to those who say that June 30th wasn't a revolution, but a coup.
The referendum is seen as a way to legitimize the military regime that ousted Islamist President Mohamed Morsi in the summer. General al-Sisi, Egypt's top general and current strongman, hinted that a strong yes vote and high turnout would give him a popular mandate to run for president in the upcoming election. To build up support, the general went out to meet voters even though he himself isn't eligible to vote. The draft is expected to pass easily, but turnout will be key.
The current government sees turnout for the referendum as proof that the people accept it. The lower the turnout, the weaker the government looks.
Human rights activists say the opposition was silenced and that the new constitution leaves the army with too much power. The draft allows the military to appoint the defense minister and to keep its budget secret. It also maintains the possibility for civilians to be tried by a military court.
South Sudanese officials say at least 200 people died when a boat carrying civilians attempting to flee ethnic violence sank while crossing the Nile River earlier today. The disaster comes as fighting between rebels and government forces moves closer to the capital, Juba. Warfare in the world's newest nation has displaced over 400,000 people since mid-December. Tunisians have been marking the third anniversary of the Arab Spring uprising, which saw strongman Zine El Abidine Ben Ali ousted along with a decades-old dictatorship. Well, among groups who celebrated were supporters and critics of Ennahda, the moderate Islamist party voted to power after Ben Ali's downfall, but which resigned last week under mounting pressure. Officials say Algeria's ailing President Abdelaziz Bouteflika has been flown to Paris for a routine check-up at the same hospital where he was treated last year for a mini-stroke. The President's office said the health check will last all week, but added the 76-year-old had no emergency procedures planned. And finally, we won't tolerate a resurgence of the M23 rebel groups. The warning from the UN's special representative in the DR Congo on Monday. Martin Kobler cited credible reports that M23 rebel recruitment hadn't stopped despite a December peace deal after rebels surrendered in November. While UN experts accuse Kigali and Kampala of assisting the M23 militarily, a claim both countries deny. Earlier, I spoke to Mary Robinson, the Special Envoy for the Great Lakes region of Africa.
What is very important from my point of view as the Special Envoy at the regional level is the progress that we have made, the facilitation by Uganda, the number of times that this conference that I'm at the moment, it had 7 special sessions last year under the auspices of Uganda to make sure that we move forward. There was a long, drawn-out Kampala process that came to a good conclusion on the 12th of December. I don't want to sound totally positive, but I do think it's necessary to set out that this region is taking ownership of the problems of the region and has been able to move this forward. Now, with the agreement on the 12th of December, there's a process for those who fled, the M23 who fled into Uganda and into Rwanda earlier in the split, come back under a amnesty for those who haven't committed serious crimes. And that's a bit slowed. And that is causing, I think, some of the problems. We need to accelerate that process. There is a responsibility of the Democratic Republic of Congo. They have an amnesty law before their parliament. It really needs to be passed. They have to have this plan of DDR, and they need help from the partners. And Uganda and Rwanda shouldn't let people who have committed serious crimes roam around. I mean, it's that kind of issue. And we are on the brink of really moving forward with the peace, security and cooperation framework, which is my mandate, to help to have real progress in the region.
That's all from your Africa team for today. We're back at the same time tomorrow. Join us then.
Let me add my thanks to to Rochelle and the Africa News team, of course, back for their double stint in live from Paris tomorrow, as every day. We take a short break. After that, we bring you another world news update. We've got focus on the situation regarding a possible baby boom in China. We'll explain why. And in sport, well, a wide and varied menu as ever with Dan Levy, including why Madrid is the real deal. Real, Real, you work it out. Stay with us.